Hello everybody, welcome to my new video. Today I'll be teaching you how to make a patch using Ember. This video is different from my previous video on how to make a patch because this time I'll show you how to create a patch with a clean border. Before you move forward, make sure to measure out how big your circle is by clicking on the measure icon and measuring it from side to side by clicking and dragging. This will show you how big your patch will be when it gets embroidered out. So in my case, it'll be 2.5 inches wide and 2.5 inches in height. Next, click on outline and change the stitch length to 5mm. This is because this is going to be the placement stitch, so it doesn't have to be stitched out that tightly. The next step is to change it to a different color. I just chose orange. Now we're going to duplicate this, so I'm just going to right click on the layer and click on copy. Then I'm going to click back outside and then paste it back in. I'm also going to change the thread color so that when the machine is stitching it out, it will pause before stitching it out. Because if you use the same color, it will just go around twice without stopping. Next, I went to Google to find the image that I want, and then I copied the image link. And then I uploaded the image URL into Ember. Once your image is inside Ember, readjust the size by clicking on the four corners and dragging until you get to the size that you want. And I'm just going to save my image now because Ember doesn't autosave, so if your browser crashes, all your work will be gone. So make sure to save often. To begin digitizing, I usually zoom in up close to the image by clicking on the magnifying glass at the bottom left. And now I'm just going to click on draw close shape. This is for the outline of Snoopy. As you can see, there's a black outline. So right now I'm just going to trace that outline. So just to remember, when you're creating straight lines, use the left click button, and then if you're wanting to make curved or rounded lines, use the right click. Okay, so that's now done. I'm just going to go to the outline and change it to a satin stitch. So you do this by going to this third icon here, and then for the outline, select satin. And I'm also going to make the satin stitch a little bit thinner, so I'm changing the width to 1mm. And then I'm also going to change the color to black. So for the satin outline, I also changed the view to a more realistic view by clicking on the eye icon at the bottom. And now I will digitize the white part of Snoopy. So I'm just going to click on draw close shape again, and then go around the outline again. Okay, so now that that's done, click on fill, and then click on fill again. So right now we're using the tatami fill. And right now Snoopy is yellow, but he isn't yellow. So let's change the color to white. I did this by searching for the color white in the search bar. Next, we're going to create the ear, so make sure the closed shape is selected and just draw around the ear. Now that that is done, let's click on fill and then click on fill again. And let's change the color to black. So right now the ear is in front of the body and it shouldn't be, it should be underneath the white part. So I'm just going to adjust the layer to above the satin stitch outline. Next I'm going to create the nose, so I'm going to click on draw circle and then I'm just going to create a circle for the nose. And then let's fill it in by clicking on Fill. And of course, let's change the color to black. And then once again, I'm just going to adjust the layer so that it's above the satin stitch outline. Now the outline should stitch out after the white part of Snoopy. So I'm just going to move the white layer above the satin stitch so that it gets stitched out before it. Now I'm going to change the view again so that I can see what I need to digitize still. And in this case, I still need to create the eyes and the collar. So for the eyes, I'm just going to click on Draw Open Shape. So it's basically just a straight line. And then now let's change the stitch to a satin stitch. And as you can see, it's way too wide, so I'm going to change the width of it to something thinner. And in this case, I ended up choosing 0.75 millimeters. And also change the color to black. And we are done with the eyes now. And now let's move on to the red house. So for this one, I'm going to click on the pencil icon and then click on Draw Closed Shape. Okay, now that everything's done, I'm going to change the color to red and also click on Fill. I also changed the stitch angle to 60 degrees. I want this to be stitched up before Snoopy, so I'm just going to put the layer right above the black outlines and just right after the two outline circles. Next, I'm going to create the outline of the red house, but instead of digitizing it, I'm just going to make a copy of this red house. And then I'm going to change the color to black. Next, I'm going to go to Outline and change the outline to satin and make the width 1 millimeters, and then click on Outline. And now we have the outline without actually digitizing it. Next, I'm just going to click on Draw Open Shape and then create the lines of the house. And since I can't see the black lines under my embroidery, I'm just going to change the view first by clicking on the eye icon at the bottom. Now that we can see the black lines, I'm just going to go ahead and follow these lines and create a black line straight through. Now that I've created all the lines, I'm just going to go to Outline and change it to a satin stitch and change the width to 1 millimeters, and then click on Outline for it to update. So I realized I forgot to include Snoopy's collar, so I'm just going to add that in really quickly by clicking on Draw Open Shape and just creating a straight line like this. And we'll just have to change the color to black again and change the outline here to satin stitch and make it 1 millimeter and click on Outline. Next, we're going to create another tack down stitch. This is for the back part of the patch. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. So Control C, and then let's just Control V. And now you'll see that there's 3 circles, but we want this to go at the very bottom here. So let's move that there. And now let's copy this again. And now this will be the satin stitch for the border. So I'm just going to change the color of this tack down stitch first. I'm just going to choose a random color. So I don't know, let's do cream brown. Okay, and then for this one, I'm just going to change it to a satin stitch by going to Outline, Satin, and 2 millimeters is good. So I'm just going to click on Outline. So actually for the outline, I'm just going to make this a bit thicker. So instead of 2, I'm just going to do 3 and then click on Outline. The last step is to save your creation because Ember doesn't autosave. So all you have to do is click on save, save changes, and also download the file so that you could export it to your embroidery machine. So this step is totally optional. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I just imported my creation into Inkstitch, and then I'm just going to visualize and export, and then go to simulator. This way I can see how it gets stitched out and whether everything is correct or not. Yeah, Ember doesn't have this feature yet. I'm not sure if they will implement it or not, but I think it's very useful to see how your embroidery design will get stitched out before you actually transfer it to your embroidery machine to get it stitched out. So the most important material is this plastic sheeting I got. It's 4 mil thick, and I got this off of Amazon. Next, I grabbed my magnetic hoop, and then I cut a piece of the plastic out and made sure it was large enough to cover the hoop. And then I just snapped the other piece on top, and then make sure it's nice and taut. And this is how it should look like. Now, transfer to your embroidery machine and stitch out the circle. Now that you have the circle stitched out, grab a piece of felt or any material that you want. Make sure it's bigger than the circle and then place it over the circle. Next, you're going to stitch the next tack down stitch. Some people like to cut out the exact size of the material first. To do that, you'll just have to get the exact measurements of the circle, and then you could cut out a piece of paper and then use that as a guide to cut out your fabric, and then you could just use that instead of using a piece of felt that's bigger than the circle. So when you're embroidering, make sure to stop before the second last tack down circle stitch, and the next step is just to put a piece of felt on the back side of your embroidery. You could do this using either glue spray or you could use masking tape. I use masking tape because I was just too lazy to use the spray. Just to note, this method isn't as secure as using the glue spray, so keep that in mind when you're taping it. And this is what it looks like. So at the bottom, make sure that it's properly in place. Now that we're done with that, we could embroider out the second last tack down stitch. So as you can see, the back piece of fabric is now securely attached. And now we're just going to cut around the circles. When you're cutting, try to cut as close as possible to the outline. It's fine if you end up cutting a little bit onto the outline. And now just do the same thing for the back side. So I'm just going to remove the masking tape and cut around the circle as closely as possible. And now we are ready to stitch out the last satin stitch. This will be the border of our patch. So this is what it looks like completed. There's like a little bit of the felt sticking out, but that's my fault because I didn't cut close enough to the edge. And now that we're done, you could just remove it from your hoop. And this is what the back looks like. There's some white thread showing up. That's the bobbin thread. I should have switched it to a black bobbin thread instead, but I didn't have any, so that's why it's like that. So it's best if you're making patches to match the bobbin thread as well. And now for the fun part, you could just directly pop the patch out of the plastic. And as you can see, the edges are very clean. You don't see any stabilizer. You'll see some white fabric sticking out. Once again, just cut closer to the edge. So I touched it up by cutting off the excess fabric around the edges, and this is what it looks like. And I'm pretty happy with how it looks. The edges are quite clean, and it's stitched out pretty well. And yeah, so that is all. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope you learned something from this.